Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. You've heard me say that many times if you've watched this program over the past 8 years. This is August the 26th of 2015. Well, why do I tell you that? So that when this program is replayed, people will know when it was done and not think, well, this is right now. I have a special guest today that I met in passing at a restaurant in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, about a year ago. My wife and I were headed for Taos or Santa Fe, one or the other. And this fellow at the restaurant asked my wife, "Is that Leon Blevins? Is that your husband?" And she said, "Yes, that's my husband, Leon Blevins." He said, "Well, I watch him on television." Oh, he was talking about this show, Perspectives El Paso. So we had a chance to shake hands and meet there, and he and his wife were headed toward Albuquerque. And this is Joe Gomez. I said, "Joe, I have seen you. I've seen you on TV news. I've seen you at a few events. And I know you from relationships at UTEP and UTEP athletics." He said, "That's right." Come to find out, he wanted to be on my show. I said, "Let's do it when we have the chance." Here we are today. And I found out he's UTEP's #1 basketball fan. Now, he likes all UTEP sports. Let's not get it wrong. But especially he fell in love with UTEP basketball because of something happened there. And I was teaching there in 1966 when the UTEP Miners won the National Basketball Championship. Coach Don Haskins putting in 5 African Americans as starters in that game and won that championship. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
I don't often get to meet a #1 fan of an organization.
Well, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Now tell us a little bit about you. The audience would probably like to know a little about who you are, what's your background, finding your way to El Paso, Texas.
Well, my father was in the military, and we came to El Paso when the Air Defense Artillery at Fort Bliss started. He was a pretty smart guy, technology-wise, and so he came to El Paso to go to the missile schools.
Okay.
And so from here, we were here a couple of years. Then we moved to Germany. We were there 3 years, came back to El Paso, graduated from Burgess High School in 1965. And I always wanted to go to Notre Dame. And with 5 children, we didn't have enough, there wasn't enough money to do that. Mm-hmm. So I enrolled at Texas Western College, and expecting disappointments. It was fantastic. I mean, we had a great football team. I went to the first football game, went to the basketball games, and I'd always played sports, so I played intramural sports. But that's basically my background. I majored in history at UTEP with a minor in physical education. I had a very good influence by a guy named John Gooden, mm-hmm. who was my track coach at Burgess, and he was a history teacher. Mm-hmm. Many years later, I actually substituted in one of his classes at Austin High School.
Oh, good.
So,
well, my bachelor's was at Wayland Baptist College, now Wayland Baptist University. Got married, ended up in El Paso. My wife had gone to Esleda High School, so we had some connections here. And we both ended up here in El Paso. 1965 to 67, I took graduate classes in political science, and I taught as a teaching assistant, team teaching with Dr. Melvin Strauss, a well-known teacher. And so I got a master's degree that was, I think, the second person to get one that said University of Texas at El Paso, because they changed the name from Texas Western College. I was teaching here in 1966 when that team won that national championship. Memorable time, right?
Well, absolutely. I was a freshman, fall of '65. I had many of the football players, basketball players, where we had classes together. Mm-hmm. And I got in the habit of trying to help them with school because, they leave school for a couple of weeks on the road. Right. And so I got to know them pretty well. I especially got to know Bobby Joe Hill and Harry Flournoy. I got to know them very, very well. And so I followed them through the basketball season. I mean, I would go to every game. And it wasn't really pandemonium yet until it was a memorable December, because that day we had the Sun Bowl football game, and Billy Stevens was the quarterback. We beat TCU 13-12 TCU had no black players whatsoever. At that time, the Southwestern Conference had no black players in any sport.
Now we're talking football.
Talking football.
Yeah, I had Billy Stevens and Chuck Hughes in my classes. Okay.
Well, that afternoon in December was very memorable because we win the football game. And I remember as a student, I was 18 years old, I'd walk out of the Sun Bowl Stadium, walk over to Memorial Gym, and it was the Sun Carnival basketball tournament. And we were playing Iowa, who was ranked 4th in the polls. And that was a memorable game. After we won that game against Iowa that day, we really started to get some recognition nationally, and everybody, then it became really hard to get tickets, so you had to get there early.
Right.
But that game was the pivotal game for that 1966 team.
Now, what did you bring me?
Well, this is one of a kind. I do not believe there's many of them. A friend of mine from Baltimore sent that to me. That's dated Friday, March 18th. It's the Washington Daily News. And this ran on the front page of the Daily News the day before the championship game. And it shows all 4 teams with all 4 coaches, and presumably the Texas Western, yes, starting 5 African Americans, but those are the players that Don Haskins had listed. Nobody knew that he had an ace up his sleeve to start Willie Worsley in place of Neville Shedd, because Kentucky was a fast-paced team, and so Coach Haskins wanted to have 3 guards on the floor to protect against that speed, give up size, but protect against that speed. They were a fast break team. So Willie Worsley's picture is not here, but the next day Coach Haskins pulled one out of the hat and started Willie Worsley.
He was a great strategist.
He was, what they say, he was sly as a fox.
Now, I've lived for years next to the Cager family, Willie Cager and Barbara and his family, and they've told us some interesting stories over the years. I had Willie on this show a couple of years ago, and so you remember him quite well. Now, what else did you bring us here? You brought another something.
Well, this one is nothing, doesn't have any much to do with the 1966 team, but there's not many of these either. This is the 1972 Olympic basketball team. Of course, we remember the 1972 Olympics because of the attack on the Israel dormitory.
Okay.
Coach Haskins was one of the assistant coaches, and the head coach was Coach Haskins' college coach, Hank Iba. And the memorable thing about this, aside from the fact that Jim Forbes, who went to Bel Air High School, was on that team. Jim Forbes was on the floor. They replayed the last 3 seconds 3 times because the Russian coach was protesting. Doug Collins was at the line. He made 2 free throws. We were up by 1. And as they're going back down the court, the Russians are going back down the court, the guy's pounding the desk saying, I called timeout, I called timeout. That point should have never counted. Anyway, short, the point was played 3 times. And eventually the Russians were the winners, and that was the first time that we had ever lost a finals in basketball in the Olympics. So there's very few of these because that's Coach Haskins right there.
I'm going to show one other thing you brought, and then I'm going to show something that I brought. The city. There's your picture on the front page of this publication here in El Paso, the city, and you autographed it to me. Thank you very much. I've got a collector's item.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And by the way, I should mention that Joe has been honored by a group I'm with, the El Paso Historical Society, honored just a couple of years ago or so for work not only with sports at UTEP, but with historical things here in El Paso. You've helped set up the wall displays at the Museum of History for the Haskins and the team, for Farah, if I remember, and for the last time I saw you, I was Uncle Sam, and the thing you helped set up was about honoring the military in Fort Bliss.
Yes.
Right? So you deservedly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All of these wonderful honors.
Very flattering.
Thank you for that gift. Now then, I brought with me, Willie Cager autographed this one for me. This is the movie Glory Road, and here's a little paperback book. As I understand, I think that you helped with this. Didn't you help with the movie and Glory Road?
Well, in fact, there's a section in the back. It's called Legend of the Bear, on the back. These are what they call the bonus features, and it says Legacy of the Bear, and I'm in there. I got interviewed by the folks. When the Disney people came, they had really no idea about the costumes and uniforms or anything else. So they wanted me to loan them some pieces to take back to Los Angeles.
Ooh, that makes you nervous, doesn't it?
Which I wouldn't do. But I let them take very good photographs of a Letterman's jacket, a jersey, and then I went on to find for them the fabric company that had made the uniforms back then. They were still in existence up in Minnesota, a company called Fabnet. And so by giving them the name of the company, they were able to resurrect some fabric and duplicate the uniforms for the movie. And then I was in one of the features, but as they say, was left on the cutting room floor.
Well, this is your history background coming up. You're not just a cheerleader for a team. This is your history and your research background coming out, right?
Yes, it is, and I think it's important as a legacy for people that it wasn't just winning a game or many of those things. I think that it's like I have many pictures at my house, but they're just pictures. They're just photographs. Unless there's something behind each one of them, they don't mean anything.
Right.
So I really enjoy being able to have folks and show a photograph and tell them some history about it, because history is very important to me.
Okay. Now, when I had Willie Cager on this program, he made it a point to hold his hand kind of like this, because he had a very special ring on, and I've noticed that you have the ring on. How did this come about?
Well, in the fall of 1985, I went to the athletic department. I asked them if I could get involved in a reunion, 20-year reunion of the '66 team. And I'll be very honest with you, and I've always been upfront with folks. They had no interest in doing that whatsoever.
Oh.
So I went to Coach Haskins. Coach Haskins really told me, well, I wish I'd have come in second place. I've had so many issues with coming in first place.
I know. He told me that.
Many bad letters, many accusations. And so I said, well, the athletic department said the same thing. And he said, well, what did they say? And I told him, and he said, I want you to do it. So thanks to John and Henry Silverman, I was able to secure rings for every player.
Silverman, a jeweler, right?
Yes, yeah. John and Henry Silverman.
You don't have to hold that up forever, but...
Yeah.
That's great.
So I was able to secure rings for the team. It wasn't fashionable in 1966 to receive rings, but it became fashionable.
Right.
The team received a standard NCAA watch that everybody gets, whether you won first place or last place. So I was able to secure the rings and give them to them, and that just started the ball rolling. Because of the negativity that I received, I decided that I would kind of take a look at all the players and where they were from. So I called New York newspapers, I called Los Angeles newspapers, I called Indiana newspapers, Houston, and before you know it, the reunion that we had that March of 1986 brought in a lot of national publicity, including Sports Illustrated, who didn't write an article, but so that kind of got the ball rolling for the 25th and so on and so forth.
I lived on the Far East Side back then when I was going back and forth. We didn't live over there close to Sarco because of the smokestack and everything. The freeway downtown was still under construction. So I usually would take a lunch and eat in the faculty lounge. I'm glad that happened because Don Haskins would occasionally come in with his brown bag and we would sit and talk, and he was going to there and everywhere. And then he comes back from the championship and he expressed what you heard, that sometimes he wished he hadn't won it because of all these nasty letters he got. He never read any out loud to some of us there in the lounge, but he would tell us some of the things that were coming in, and he was so hurt by that. We have come a long way since, and we still have a ways to go in race relations in this country, but we have come a long way, right?
We've come a long way, and I think, Professor Blevins, the one thing we forget sometimes is that this small school with maybe 7,000 kids at the time and this basketball team played a huge role in civil rights because of the fact that other coaches in the South saw what happened. They started opening up the doors for black athletes in the South, black students, non-athletes. You already had out in San Francisco basketball teams that won the national championship with black athletes. You had them in the Midwest. But the South, this was a huge, huge event, especially since the game was played 12 miles from the United States Capitol. And you had just gone through the Equal Rights Amendment, you had just gone through the Voting Rights Amendment, and this team, it was monumental what they did, and people outside of the city of El Paso, people really understand it, appreciate it, especially the black athletes. And I will tell you who appreciates it also is Pat Riley, because since he played, for the Lakers, and he's become a head coach, and he's become an owner, and so on, and general manager, he understood what black players brought to the court, and he understood the talent, and it was not about color. It was about great basketball players.
Oh, yeah. That's what Don wanted, was good basketball players.
Exactly.
Let me ask you about your crystal moments. I've recently written my autobiography, and I call it Crystal Moments, where I know exactly where I was when certain events happened. Tell me, before our time runs out, we only have 28 minutes,
okay,
about some of your crystal moments with UTEP.
Well, and again, I'll be very honest. Crystal moment was the fall of 1965. I was a very good student. I was a good athlete, and I found it incredible that I left the compounds at Fort Bliss and went to Texas Western and realized that early or mid 60s, I couldn't get in a fraternity. Being in a fraternity and being Hispanic, it was not possible.
Oh my!
There was only one fraternity that I was able to pledge, and that was TKE. And the reason that chapter was there was because Don Henderson, who would later become mayor of the city, he revived that particular chapter because he ran into the same issue with one of his best friends from Alamogordo, wanted to get in a fraternity, and he couldn't. So that's a crystal moment. The other crystal moment, of course, is the national championship, which I got to watch with a lot of my fraternity brothers.
You went to Maryland?
No, I did not. We were all sitting in front of a black and white television set with aluminum foil on the antennas to make it.
That sounds like where we were. We were in an apartment, and we were eating snacks, and when that final buzzer went off, my wife threw food all over the wall because she was so excited. You saw that all over town?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I was downtown at the plaza, San Jacinto Plaza. We went around the plaza. We came back to UTEP. That's a crystal moment because it helped define a lot of the reasons why I wanted to major in history. I felt that was historical. It's a moment in history that we really need to continue and appreciate. I haven't been really a one-man band like people say in that article, but it's really important, and it doesn't overshadow the fact that we have a wonderful university that is academic, and it has great research, and it's got great diversity. But we can't forget that particular moment in history, it is very important to a lot of people in this country. George Bush, when we went to the White House, that's another crystal moment in my life.
So you got to go to that?
Got to go to that.
Okay.
Have dinner with President Bush and the team. So that's another crystal moment. Wow. Because who would ever thought that, a military brat would be with the President of the United States? And I can tell you, he absolutely loved that team. He thought that, like I do, that it was a really important moment in history.
Now, the saddest moment of that was Don did not get to go because of his health, right?
That's correct. Yes, he didn't. In fact, because of his health, he didn't get to go to that. He didn't get to go to the ESPYs at the movie. Glory Road won an ESPY award. He didn't get to go to the National Basketball Hall of Fame when the team was inducted. By that time, his health was getting, he was going downhill with that, with his health. Another crystal moment, believe it, aside from the birth of my children, the National Basketball Association, when they got inducted in 2007, you had Phil Jackson being inducted. You had Roy Williams from Kansas and then North Carolina being inducted. The only standing ovation was for that team. And you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You had a lot of big-time NBA players that rose to their feet when Harry Flournoy finished his speech. So that's another crystal moment. And down the road, there's another one coming. It's the 50th anniversary of that championship.
Right.
And the school is, I understand, I don't know all the details, but I understand that they have planned a lot of things that they will announce sometime down the road. And I hope I'm a part of it, because I've lived it all, and I know all those guys. And sad that Bobby Joe Hill wasn't around to see all of that. But those are kind of, in a nutshell, some of my, and it all surrounds UTEP, because without my education at UTEP, I'm not sure where I'd be.
Yeah. Well, now it's been redesigned. The new Centennial Plaza that is there, that has changed it, the new buildings. I've had Dr. Natalicia on in the past, several years ago, and talking about the changes, what she's proudest of. She's proudest of those academic research things, the things that involve knowledge and information. Sure, she's proud of sports, but sports can lay a foundation that someone can get an education with.
Sure.
If they'll do it.
Absolutely.
Well, we have a few minutes left. Any other things that you'd like to bring up? And do we need to give a telephone number or anything if people say have some memorabilia they would like to add to your collection? Because some of your collection, I don't know what's going to happen with it after you pass from the scene. Will it go to UTEP for a museum or anything?
Well, I have several items on loan at UTEP that would go to them when I pass.
Okay.
I also have a wonderful 4 feet by 6 foot painting of Coach Haskins. In fact, done by Philip Beheimer, who used to teach at El Paso Community College.
Yeah.
I
remember him.
That painting was commissioned by Adair Margot, wonderful lady. She commissioned that painting, and then commissioned some posters to go along with that to celebrate Coach Haskins' induction into the 1997 into the National Basketball Hall of Fame. So that painting is mine, and it hangs on the south entrance to the Don Haskins Center. So those things I've already kind of set aside to go to them if they have an interest.
Yeah, right.
If they don't have an interest, I have had some conversations that the Bullock Museum in Austin would like to have some. I've also had some conversations that the Black History Museum in Washington, D.C. Would like to have some photographs. But again, the photographs without the history there's nothing there. I would like to say one thing, though, that it was a tough victory for Coach Haskins, because the Kentucky coach, Adolph Rupp, made a big deal about a couple of things. His kids were sick, which is, that's like sour grapes. He accused our team of having some guys that just got out of jail, some guys that just got out of college. And I just recently read a 1975 article in the Louisville Courier-Journal, where 9 years later he was still saying that we had some guys that were in prison. The NCAA did an investigation. They didn't find anything. And so I've spent a lot of my time writing to people and arguing with people elsewhere. Recently with a gentleman in Lexington, Kentucky, who was totally against UTEP playing Kentucky as a celebration for the 50th anniversary.
Well, even the movie, they softened the image of Adolph Rupp.
Well, I had heard some pretty good stuff, accounts of that there was one particular Hollywood actor that did not want to have Rupp portrayed as a racist. And so they played it very soft. But in fact, there are books out there that there's a gentleman by the name of Frank DeFord, a very celebrated Sports Illustrated writer who's still around. And he followed the Kentucky team through the Final Four. And he was in the locker room. And there's a book out there that pretty well finally describes the sentiment of the Kentucky coach at halftime, when it was really only a 34-32 or 34-31 halftime score. Bobby Joe had already done damage with a couple of steals, but that particular book tells you exactly what the sentiments were. It's okay for people to have sentiments, and they change as time progresses. But it's still in 1975, 9 years later, he still wasn't.
And that's your historian coming out again. You
Yes,
want the accuracy of the story,
Exactly.
not made up information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's history. It's forgotten. People change. But I'll tell you one real quick tidbit. The movie's called Glory Road, but Adolph Rupp, he was 70 years old. The Commonwealth of Kentucky says you have to retire. So he retired, and they had a roast for him. And a lot of his players, you know, his favorite team, of course, was the 1966 team, you know, called Rupp's Runs. So when it was finally time for him to speak, his last words were, "For all of you that have traveled the Glory Road with me, I will forever be grateful."
Oh, man.
So Glory Road, was that Hollywood? Did Hollywood know that? Was that just a name that they picked out of the sky? I have the VHS tape that's called Glory Road, and it's Adolph Rupp's roast.
Well, Joe, you have so many wonderful memories. We need a 3-hour program.
Absolutely, I'd love it. I'd love it. I mean, before my mind goes away, before I go into a total blank.
Oh my goodness!
But I really appreciate it. Appreciate you letting me talk about my passion.
Yeah, well, you're a passionate man, and you wear that ring proudly. All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All that you have done as a historian, as a cheerleader, as a human being here in El
Thank
Paso, Texas. Again, thank you very much for watching Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins. Tune in again for another good show.
We thank Joe Gomez, a forgotten person in this. But Joe Gomez, 20-some-odd years ago, decided that we were not going to be forgotten for what we've done, not only for the city of El Paso, but for the whole country. And he had a reunion that was so successful that he had to have several more after that. We want you to understand this. Understand this, that we did what we did because it was necessary. When you go back into those days and you know that these guys played hard, and we played the game because it was an escape for us. It was an escape from the reality of the times. It was when people would tell you what you couldn't do. People would tell you that you can't put 5 black players out on the floor at the same time. They would ask the question, why? Because they're black. You can't have 5 black players out there and think that one of them is going to lead the team. Why? Because they're black. If you put 5 black players out there, when the game gets tight, they're going to quit on you. Why? Because they're black. We had to break that.